Golden Age Hollywood looked glamorous on the outside, but behind the cameras, dark secrets festered. From mysterious deaths and cover-ups to shocking abuse and betrayal, these are the scandals the studios fought desperately to bury. Some were erased from history, until now. Stick around to uncover 15 of the darkest Hollywood secrets, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold truths. 1. The mysterious death of Paul Bern, Jean Harlow's haunted marriage. In 1932, Jean Harlow was Hollywood's platinum blonde bombshell, America's obsession. But her rise was overshadowed by a twisted mystery: the shocking death of her husband, MGM producer Paul Bern. On September 5th, he was found dead in their home, a bullet in his head, and a cryptic note addressed to Harlow at his side. The note ended with the chilling line, "You understand that last night was only a comedy." The studio rushed to declare it a suicide, claiming Bern was impotent and distraught. But rumors started to swirl. Bern's former lover, Dorothy Millette, had reappeared just days before. Millette had reportedly come out of a decade-long institutionalization and wanted to confront Bern. Some believe she murdered him in a jealous rage, then drowned herself, her body discovered days later floating in the Sacramento River. MGM's notorious fixer, Eddie Mannix, quickly swooped in. The crime scene was tampered with, press access was tightly controlled, and witnesses vanished. Harlow, under studio orders, was told to stay quiet and smile. The true story behind Paul Bern's death remains a Hollywood riddle. Was it suicide, murder, or something even darker involving studio manipulation and cover-up? The scandal nearly destroyed Harlow's career and left behind a lingering stain that even Tinseltown couldn't bleach away. 2. Fatty Arbuckle and the first Hollywood sex scandal. Long before Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby, there was Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, the first megastar to be brought down by scandal. In 1921, Arbuckle was at the peak of his comedic career, earning millions and living the high life. That all came crashing down over one wild weekend at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. There, during a booze-fueled party, Arbuckle was found in a hotel suite with a struggling young actress named Virginia Rapp. Witnesses heard screams, and moments later, Rapp was writhing in agony. 4 days later, she died from a ruptured bladder. Arbuckle was accused of raping her so violently that it caused her death. The headlines were brutal. America's lovable clown became a symbol of Hollywood's corruption. Arbuckle faced 3 trials. 2 ended in hung juries, and the third finally acquitted him with an apology. But the damage was done. Studios blacklisted him, the public shunned him, and his career was permanently ruined. Behind the scenes, Paramount and other power players worked furiously to contain the scandal. They even paid off witnesses and silenced journalists. Though never convicted, Arbuckle's name was effectively erased from Hollywood history. The industry didn't just sacrifice him, they buried him. And decades later, he's still remembered not for his films, but for a scandal that destroyed a star and revealed Hollywood's darkest underbelly. 3. Judy Garland's forced starvation and studio drugging. When Judy Garland first signed with MGM, she was just 13, sweet, awkward, and immensely talented. But studio executives didn't want wholesome. They wanted perfection. And what they saw in Garland didn't fit their mold. Louis B. Mayer, the powerful studio head, called her "my little hunchback." She was ridiculed for her looks, her weight, even her nose. Studio staff reportedly called her a fat little pig in pigtails. But what MGM did to control her image was far worse. Executives placed Garland on a brutal regimen. black coffee for breakfast, diet pills for energy, and sleeping pills to crash. The cycle never stopped. Filming The Wizard of Oz meant 18-hour days with little rest and forced appetite suppression. Her growing dependency on amphetamines and barbiturates was no accident. It was orchestrated. She wasn't alone. Studio doctors fed these pep pills to multiple stars. But Judy bore the worst of it. She was a child made to feel broken, a teen numbed by drugs, and eventually a woman battling addiction, insecurity, and mental collapse. By the time she was 47, Judy Garland was dead. Official cause: overdose. But anyone who knew her story understood it wasn't just the pills. It was decades of systematic abuse by the very machine that built her. And Hollywood, once again, tried to wash its hands of the tragedy it created. George Reeves, the Superman who didn't kill himself? To the world, George Reeves was Superman, truth, justice, and the American way. But in 1959, the actor was found dead in his home from a gunshot wound to the head. The official ruling: suicide. But friends, family, and fans never bought it. Reeves was on the cusp of a career comeback. He was engaged. He had plans. Yet his body was discovered under suspicious circumstances. There were no fingerprints on the gun. Neighbors heard multiple gunshots. His fiancée and 2 guests were in the house that night, but waited hours to call the police. What truly raised eyebrows was his affair with Toni Mannix, the wife of MGM fixer Eddie Mannix, a man with documented ties to the mob. When Reeves broke things off to marry someone else, it's believed Toni didn't take it well, and that Eddie made sure the breakup became permanent. Hollywood went silent. The press was discouraged from digging. Witnesses changed their stories. And MGM? They acted as if Reeves had never existed. It was yet another classic case of cleaning up a mess before the public got wise. Over the years, multiple books, shows, and even films like Hollywoodland have explored the theory that George Reeves was murdered, and that the man who helped cover it up also cleaned up dozens of other scandals for the studio system. The truth still lingers in the shadows, like kryptonite, waiting to expose a lie. Lana Turner's daughter and the mobster murder. By the late 1950s, Lana Turner had lived a life that seemed scripted by the studios themselves. Glamour, fame, romance. But nothing could prepare the public for what unfolded inside her Beverly Hills home on April 4, 1958. Turner was in a volatile relationship with Johnny Stompanato, a known mobster and bodyguard for Mickey Cohen. He was possessive, violent, and notoriously abusive. Friends and family begged her to leave him. But the relationship dragged on, with more fights, more threats, and a household consumed by fear. That night, Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, heard an argument turn explosive. As the shouting grew louder, she reportedly grabbed a kitchen knife and ran to defend her mother. Moments later, Stompanato lay bleeding on the floor, dead from a single stab wound to the chest. The case was a media firestorm. A teenage girl killing a gangster to protect her movie star mother? It was the perfect noir story, except it was all too real. The studio did its best to spin the narrative, painting Cheryl as a brave daughter and Lana as a battered woman. The coroner's jury ruled it justifiable homicide. Case closed. But Hollywood insiders whispered a different theory, that Lana had killed Stompanato herself in a fit of rage, then coached Cheryl to take the fall, knowing the court would be more lenient on a child. Evidence was thin, the public divided, and Turner's career, while briefly revived by the scandal, would never fully recover. Today, the truth remains tangled in layers of PR, protection, and pain. Whether Cheryl saved her mother's life or shielded her from prison, one thing is certain. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a tragedy hidden behind diamonds, cameras, and lies. 6. The death of Thomas Ince, the bullet no one saw. Thomas Ince was a trailblazer in early Hollywood, an actor, director, and studio head who helped define the silent film era. But his death in 1924 became one of Tinseltown's most whispered legends, largely because it involved two of the most powerful figures of the time: newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst and screen icon Charlie Chaplin. It was supposed to be a celebratory weekend aboard Hearst's luxurious yacht, the Oneida. Guests included Chaplin, actress Marion Davies, and Thomas Ince. But days later, Ince was dead. The official cause? Indigestion. That's right, Hollywood's founding father supposedly died from bad seafood. But rumors suggested something far more sinister. Some insiders claimed Hearst had caught Davies and Chaplin in a compromising moment. Enraged, he supposedly fired a gun in a jealous rage, missing Chaplin and accidentally hitting Ince. Others speculated that Ince confronted Hearst over a business matter, triggering a deadly fight. Still others said Ince simply suffered a heart attack and died later at home. But if that were true, why did multiple witnesses recall a violent commotion on board? Why did Chaplin never speak publicly about what happened? Why did Davies, for the rest of her life, shut down any questions about the incident? No inquest was held. The body was quickly cremated. MGM fixer Eddie Mannix may have orchestrated a cleanup behind the scenes. Even in death, Ince was denied justice. Hollywood learned something that weekend. With enough money, connections, and silence, you could make anything, even murder, disappear. 7. Judy Garland's forced abortion and lifelong control. Judy Garland wasn't just a child star. She was a commodity. And when commodities become inconvenient, studios didn't hesitate to erase the evidence, no matter how invasive or cruel. In the late 1930s, while under contract with MGM, Garland became pregnant. It was a problem. She wasn't married, and any hint of scandal could tarnish her squeaky clean image. According to multiple biographers and insiders, studio head Louis B. Mayer ordered her to terminate the pregnancy immediately. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a choice. It was a directive. Garland was ushered into a hospital under a fake name. The press never found out. And just like that, a potential life and a mother's agency were erased for the sake of box office receipts. But Garland's story was far from unique. Hollywood in the 1930s through the 50s maintained a chilling practice, forcing young, unmarried actresses into secret abortions to protect their public personas. Jean Harlow, Joan Crawford, even Bette Davis reportedly faced similar pressures. These were not isolated incidents. They were systemic violations masked by studio glamour. Garland's pain echoed beyond the operating room. Years of forced dieting, drug dependency, and emotional manipulation chipped away at her spirit. Every attempt she made to reclaim her voice, personally or professionally, was met with resistance, threats, and subtle sabotage. When Garland died in 1969 of a barbiturate overdose, the world mourned a legend. But few realized they were also mourning a woman who'd been used, silenced, and ultimately broken by an industry that made her a star, and then refused to let her be human. 8. The Superman Curse. Did the mob silence George Reeves? Hollywood is full of ghost stories, but none more chilling than the so-called Superman Curse. And it all begins with the death of George Reeves. Reeves was the original Man of Steel on television, beaming into homes across America in the 1950s. But off-screen, he was battling demons. Typecast, Frustrated and aching for a serious film career, Reeves also found himself entangled in a dangerous affair with Toni Mannix, wife of MGM's infamous fixer, Eddie Mannix. When Reeves ended the relationship to get engaged to a younger actress, things spiraled. On June 16, 1959, he was found dead in his bedroom from a gunshot wound. The death was quickly ruled a suicide. But the scene didn't make sense. Neighbors reported hearing not one, but multiple gunshots. His body was found naked on the bed, the gun resting awkwardly between his feet. No fingerprints were ever found on the weapon. And curiously, Reeves's fiancée and two guests were downstairs at the time, but waited nearly an hour to call police. Rumors exploded. Did Toni Mannix order a hit out of jealousy? Did Eddie Mannix use his mob ties to make the problem disappear? One theory even suggests that Reeves was trying to escape the grip of the studio system, an unforgivable offense at the time. In the years that followed, no charges were ever filed. No new leads surfaced, and the official version, suicide, remains on record. But Hollywood historians and former insiders continue to whisper the same thing. George Reeves didn't kill himself. Hollywood just made it look that way. 9. Natalie Wood's mysterious death. Accident or cover-up? On the surface, Natalie Wood had it all: beauty, talent, and fame that began in childhood. By the age of 43, she'd racked up 3 Oscar nominations, cemented her status as an American icon, and was preparing for another comeback. But on a cold night in 1981, during a weekend boat trip off Catalina Island, Wood vanished overboard, and Hollywood's most enduring mystery was born. She was aboard the yacht Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken. According to the official story, after a night of drinking and arguing, Natalie slipped into the water while trying to secure a dinghy and drowned. It was ruled an accident. Case closed. But that explanation never sat right with those who knew her. Wood had a well-documented fear of dark water. She never would have gone out alone, barefoot, in her nightgown. Witnesses on nearby boats reported hearing shouting and a woman crying for help. A bruised body, conflicting timelines, Wagner's strange behavior after the incident. None of it added up. Years later, the case was reopened. New witnesses came forward. The coroner revised the cause of death from accidental to undetermined. In 2018, Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest. The question remains, was it a tragic accident, a lover's quarrel turned deadly, or something deeper, something Hollywood worked to bury? To this day, no charges have ever been filed. But the image of Natalie Wood's smile haunts the silver screen like a ghost that never found peace. The truth, like the waters of Catalina, remains dark, cold, and full of secrets. 10. The Twilight Zone tragedy, Hollywood's deadliest on-set accident. In 1982, director John Landis was known for hits like Animal House and The Blues Brothers. He was brash, talented, and considered untouchable. But on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie, that arrogance led to one of the darkest and most horrifying accidents in Hollywood history, an event the industry scrambled to erase. The sequence being filmed was a Vietnam War flashback, featuring actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors, Renee Shin Chen and Micah Din Lei. The scene involved explosions, gunfire, and a low-flying helicopter. On paper, everything was permitted. In reality, almost nothing was legal. The children were working past legal hours. Their parents hadn't been fully informed of the scene's danger, and safety protocols were either ignored or outright violated. During a take, a pyrotechnic explosion went off too close to the helicopter. The pilot lost control, and in mere seconds, the chopper crashed. Morrow and the two children were decapitated and killed instantly. The footage was captured on film. Crew members were traumatized. Hollywood was shaken to its core. Landis and 4 others, including the special effects coordinator and helicopter pilot, were charged with involuntary manslaughter, the first time a director faced criminal charges for an on-set death. The trial lasted 10 months and ended with all 5 being acquitted. But the stain remained. The tragedy forever changed film industry safety regulations. But behind the scenes, a different story was told. One of backroom deals, silenced testimonies, and career-saving connections. Landis continued working. The studios moved on. The public was left with a single unanswerable question. Why did 3 people, 2 of them children, have to die for a few seconds of movie magic? 11. Charlie Chaplin's Teenage Brides. Hidden in plain sight. Charlie Chaplin was a genius of the silent screen. A global icon. A man who could make you laugh with a look, cry with a gesture. But behind the legend was a deeply controversial truth, one the industry worked hard to keep in the shadows. Chaplin had 4 wives, all of them dramatically younger. But the most troubling detail? His first 2 were just 16 years old. In 1918, at 29, Chaplin married Mildred Harris. It was short-lived. Just a few years later, he married another teenager, Lita Gray. After she became pregnant, she was also just 16. To avoid California's statutory rape laws, Chaplin took her to Mexico for the marriage. Their divorce was a scandal in itself. Lita accused him of cruelty, manipulation, and obsession. The settlement was one of the largest of the era, and the court documents were filled with shocking allegations about Chaplin's behavior. But the studios stepped in, smoothing over the headlines. Chaplin was too valuable, too beloved. The press was paid off. The public distracted. He would marry twice more, once to a 20-year-old and finally to 18-year-old Una O'Neill when he was 54. In any other context, these relationships would have destroyed a career. But in Golden Age Hollywood, Chaplin was protected. He was a genius. And geniuses, apparently, got a pass. Even decades later, his legacy remains largely untarnished. But the truth lingers behind the slapstick and bowler hat. Chaplin's romantic history wasn't just controversial, it was deeply problematic. And Hollywood kept it quiet. 12. Joan Crawford's secret adult film past, silenced by the studio. Long before she became the icy queen of Mildred Pierce and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Joan Crawford had a secret that haunted her rise to stardom, one that MGM would go to great lengths to suppress. As a struggling dancer in the 1920s, a then-unknown Crawford reportedly starred in an adult film titled Velvet Lips. She wasn't Joan Crawford yet, just Lucille Lesueur, a desperate young performer trying to survive in a cutthroat world. But when she landed a contract with MGM and her fame skyrocketed, the past threatened to catch up with her. Enter Eddie Mannix, MGM's legendary fixer. When word of the film surfaced, he didn't hesitate. According to several Hollywood historians, Mannix traced the extortionists holding the film and offered them $25,000 to hand it over. When they balked, Mannix allegedly threatened to involve the mob. The film never saw the light of day. The reels were either destroyed or buried so deep they've never resurfaced. And Crawford, rebranded and reimagined by MGM, went on to become one of the most celebrated and feared actresses in the industry. But even in her success, Crawford reportedly lived in terror of the film leaking. Gossip columnists hinted, rivals whispered, and studio execs kept paying to make sure the rumors stayed just that. Rumors. Whether velvet lips ever existed remains uncertain, but the effort to suppress it through threats, payoffs, and muscle reveals just how far the studio system would go to protect its stars, or at least to protect its investments. 13. Jackie Coogan, the child star robbed by his own parents. In the silent film era, few child actors shone brighter than Jackie Coogan. Discovered by Charlie Chaplin and immortalized in The Kid, Coogan quickly became a household name and one of Hollywood's first true child stars. By the time he reached adolescence, he had earned an estimated $4 million, roughly $60 million today. But when Coogan turned 21 and asked for his earnings, he discovered a devastating truth. The money was gone. His mother and stepfather had spent nearly all of it on jewelry, luxury cars, real estate, and personal indulgences. They claimed they owed him nothing. No promises were ever made to give Jackie anything, his mother told the press. He was a very bad boy. The public was outraged, but legally, Coogan had no protection. Children weren't recognized as the rightful owners of their earnings in Hollywood. Coogan sued, and though he was eventually awarded just $126,000 after legal fees, the damage had been done. But Jackie Coogan's suffering changed the system. His case led to the creation of the California Child Actors Bill, known today as the Coogan Law. This legislation required that a portion of a child actor's earnings be set aside in a trust, inaccessible until adulthood. While Coogan's fortune was stolen, his legacy became much greater. He turned tragedy into reform, ensuring future generations of child actors wouldn't suffer the same betrayal. Still, behind his brave face was the heartbreak of a boy whose parents had valued fame and fortune over family. Hollywood never apologized, but his fight changed it forever. The Spade Cooley murder, stardom, paranoia, and brutality. Spade Cooley was a country western icon in the 1940s and 50s, a fiddle-playing showman who became a TV sensation. But behind his flashy suits and charming persona hid a violent, jealous man with a dark temper that would eventually make him one of Hollywood's most horrifying cautionary tales. By 1961, Cooley had grown convinced that his second wife, Ella May, was having an affair. Paranoia turned to obsession. Then obsession turned to murder. One night, in front of their 14-year-old daughter, Cooley brutally beat Ella May for hours. He smashed her head against the floor. He burned her with a cigarette. And when she tried to escape, he crushed her skull with his foot, killing her instantly. The trial was a media frenzy. Cooley, who had once played sold-out shows and headlined TV specials, now sat on trial for one of the most savage crimes ever committed by a public figure. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But here's the twist that made this scandal even more disturbing. In 1969, then California Governor Ronald Reagan granted Cooley a furlough, a temporary release, to perform a benefit concert. The man who had murdered his wife was about to return to the spotlight. But fate had the final word. Hours before his concert, Spade Cooley dropped dead of a heart attack. Hollywood tried to pretend Cooley never existed. His music was shelved, his name erased from conversations. But the reality couldn't be ignored. One of Tinseltown's shining stars had become its darkest villain. And no amount of spin could clean the blood off that story. 15. Ted Healy's death. A comedian silenced by Hollywood muscle? Ted Healy was more than just the founder of the Three Stooges. He was one of the most influential comedic minds of early Hollywood. But in 1937, just as he was preparing for a career resurgence, Healy was found dead under suspicious circumstances. The official report? He died from complications of acute nephritis, supposedly brought on by heavy drinking. But witnesses and Hollywood insiders told a much more sinister tale. On the night of his death, Healy was allegedly involved in a violent altercation outside the Trocadero nightclub in Los Angeles. Eyewitnesses claimed he had been beaten by 3 men, a mob-connected producer, an actor, and a future James Bond producer named Albert Cubby Broccoli. Healy was seen with head injuries, bloodied, dazed. Then he vanished. By morning, he was dead. No autopsy, no investigation. The press went silent, and the witnesses? They stopped talking. Louis B. Mayer and MGM's notorious fixer, Eddie Mannix, were suspected of orchestrating a cover-up to protect the names involved. It wouldn't have been the first time. To this day, no one has been charged in Healy's death. And while his contributions to comedy live on, his story has been largely forgotten, overshadowed by the more famous Stooge trio he helped create. But Ted Healy's death was not just a Hollywood tragedy. It was a warning. In the Golden Age, if you crossed the wrong people or knew too much, your story could be edited or deleted before the public ever saw the final cut. The Golden Age of Hollywood dazzled us with stars and silver screens, but behind the glitz lay shadows darker than most dared to imagine. These 15 scandals weren't just controversies. They were secrets buried by power, money, and fear. If these walls could talk, they'd scream. Which of these stories shocked you most? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next deep dive into Hollywood's forgotten sins.